On this week's episode, I'm joined by Ricardo Marvao. Ricardo is the co-founder of BetaE. He's an innovator, an investor, a connector, a firestarter who's passionate about education and space. Ricardo is also a proud father and husband, and at the time of our Zoom call was sitting in Belgium and missing Portugal terribly. We discuss, amongst other things, how Portugal's resilience, innovation and creativity during the financial crisis led to one of the most amazing startup scenes in the world. And we talk about the International Space University study program, which is coming right here to Portugal. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life. I'm really excited to be joined by Ricardo Marvao. Ricardo, good morning or good afternoon there in Belgium. How are you?
All good. Thanks, Dylan, for the invite.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. Ricardo, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about you?
Okay, so my name is Ricardo. I was born in Lisbon in 1978, so I'm now 43. But I lived a life that was... My mother is French and my father is Portuguese, but he was born in Angola, and he was always very entrepreneurial. And all my life, I traveled a lot, and my father gave me this drive to think of different things, different problems, and how to solve them. We used to have this game that we used to do. He used to work in Algarve. And we used to go, and before, I mean, when I was a kid, there was no highway, so you just had the normal road, and it took forever, and so a lot of time to talk. And so we would start basically an idea at the start of the journey, and then think how that idea could actually be materialized, and what were all the pieces that were needed for the puzzle to be complete. And then the idea was to arrive to the end of the journey and have a plan. And it was very interesting because it gave me a better sense of how to actually think of areas that maybe I'm not good at, but I might know how to get the people that are good at to come in and join the project. And so my background is computer science, and then I did aerospace in Toulouse. And so I went, and even before that, I went into, I would say, my first entrepreneurial journey was when I got my first job. Was at Portugal Telecom at Tagus Park. And I felt like, okay, now I have my first job. First thing to do, get out of the parents' house. And actually, I started looking for a house, and I couldn't find anything that would be reasonable. And I think, like even now, so many years or decades later, it's still the same with a lot of young people. Lisbon was at the time full of buildings that were vacant, and a lot of them were actually owned by Santa Casa or by the city hall. And so I started to think, how could I get a home in Lisbon? And so I started this cooperative company with 25 friends to actually develop buildings in the city center for young people, for young families, like below 30 years old. How can you actually get new young families into the city center? And this was like the first project that I really started, and I was like 21, 22, something like this. And I enjoyed the project. And then one day, I had applied because of three of my girlfriends at a dinner. We were talking, and they said, "Oh, there's this program from ICEP called Inov Contact, and you should apply. I don't know if you know this program, but basically it's a program that exists for maybe 20 or 30 years. And basically it sends out Portuguese people to do an internship anywhere in the world. Okay, and it's and a lot of people do it, and it's a paid internship, and to really amazing organizations all around the world. And but the catch is, you get in, you don't know where you're gonna go. So it could be Spain or it could be Singapore. You don't know. And so and you only find out at the end of the initial program. Then they say your name, and this is the company where you're going to, and the location of it. And so I had applied, and then I got this phone call while I was working at this project for the cooperative company, saying that I got in, and I had to go to this course that they were having for a couple of days, and then they would direct me to a position. And so I went, and I got this Ricardo Marvao European Space Agency. And so in 2003, I went to ESA, and basically to their operation center in Darmstadt in Germany.
Wow.
And it was very interesting because my first week we had the launch, and like the first week you arrive and you go like to the control center, like in the movies, and you go and you go like systems check, and they go like every single area, and you go like, are you go for launch, go for launch, go for launch, and all the areas, and you listen to this, and it's like, this is a movie. And my first week was like that kind of movie. And so I fell in love with it, and really enjoyed. And then after a while, my boss came and talked with another colleague of mine and said, we like the work that Ricardo is doing, and we'd like him to stay. How can we find a way? And so me and this other colleague, which is another Portuguese called Nuno Sebastião, he's now the CEO of Feedzai. I don't know if you know the company, but it's a big finance or fintech startup. And we basically started talking, and we said, what if we start our own startup, our own company, and deliver services to ESA? Because both of us wanted to stay, and both of us saw an opportunity there. Plus, Portugal had just been onboarded at the European Space Agency. And so the cool thing about it was that Portugal had to have more companies so that the industry would start. And because of that, there were good conditions to onboard new companies, new industry from Portugal into the space industry, into the European space industry. And so we took that, and we actually developed a company, and that company grew over the years. And then back in 2010, as they grew, it grew to about 20 people. And then we have an office also besides Germany, we have an office in Lisbon, and we started developing software for a bunch of companies, not only in space, but then in aerospace and then defense. And we got an offer from a big corporate in Portugal to be acquired. And then after some negotiation, we were acquired, and I got into that corporate for a couple of years and worked in that corporate for a couple of years. But at the same time that I was there, I had always been an entrepreneur, and I felt like I needed something to actually continue the journey of an entrepreneur in my mind. And so before I got into that big corporate, with a few friends, we started BetaE, which was at the time, this was 2010. If you remember well, Portugal was in a bad moment at that time, huge unemployment. and we felt we needed to help in some way. So we created this nonprofit to help young generation to look at entrepreneurship as a way to get out of the crisis. So if you can't find a job, create your own job. And so we started by inspiring people, by talking with or bringing people that had gone through the experience of being an entrepreneur, and talking about what went well, what were the failures, all the things that mattered through the journey, to inspire these people to actually, okay, now I have an idea, how do I start? And so we started after that pre-accelerators for startups, then accelerators, so idea to prototype, then prototype to product, then go international, get some funding, and BetaE grew. And today I'm still at BetaE. It's been 10 years, and it's amazing to see the progress. We're around 60 people now. We have a big office in Lisbon, and then another big office in São Paulo in Brazil. And we help today a lot of corporates and startups to actually develop business together, collaborate in business, find solutions for big challenges inside big industries, so that you have an impact. So that's quickly, that's the journey.
Wow. Okay. I want us to take two steps back before we start talking about what you're currently working on and some of the future projects that are coming up as well. Ricardo, you mentioned going on drives with your dad, and the way this sort of creativity was birthed, and this sort of problem solving was kind of like fostered in you. What do you want people to know about your life growing up in Lisbon, and what it was like, and how that influenced you?
Yeah,
That?
I mean, what I think what influenced me was I was never in a one place. I know that you need roots, but somehow with my parents, I never had like, yes, Lisbon was home, but because of all the travel, and I also lived 1 year in Tavira, in the Algarve, which was amazing for me in terms of learning, because you go from the way students behave in Lisbon to the way students behave in a small town. At the time, Tavira was really tiny.
What year was that?
That was like, I don't know, I was 12, I think, 12, 13. So maybe in 1990, something like this.
Yeah, it was very different back then.
Yeah.
It
And
was a proper fishing village. It wasn't what it is
yes,
today.
I mean, most of the kids at my school were the kids of the fishermen. And so there was different conversations from those that I had in Lisbon. And then I was in private schools up to that point, and then suddenly I go to a public school in Tavira, which also changed completely the way, I mean, especially when you go from private schools to public schools, you really see a difference. And I think everyone should do that, because it grows a lot of new stuff on you, and you understand the world so much better. And for me, then coming back, I went to a public school in Lisbon, and also another different aspect of it that was very, very interesting. And I think the fact that I had all these, even with my father, he worked in real estate, and my father always brought in like foreigners to the house for a dinner, for some cocktails, just chat, and we were always presently listening to all these languages. So it was the travel, the languages, the constant moving. It just made me realize that I like to travel, and I like to see the world, and I like to engage with different communities, different nationalities. You could say that more than being Portuguese, I feel European, because in Europe you have so many different ways. It's not like in the States where it's like one common language and more or less the same kinds of ideals. Here in Europe, I mean, there's so many different things in this very small space that I guess that's what drove me to be what also I am today.
Okay. What I'm going to ask you, maybe it's a strange question, but what, in your opinion, makes you, what are those things that make you Portuguese? You talk about being more European, but you are Portuguese. What are those
Yeah,
things that make you Portuguese, do you think?
I think, I mean, of course, when I went, and every time I go outside, I really realize that Portugal is an amazing place to live. I mean, the quality of life that you get is really, really good. Uh, I also missed a lot of times the ocean. I always lived near the ocean, and my parents had the view of the ocean from their apartment. And so I always grew up looking at the ocean. And that was one of the things that I missed the most when I was outside. The beach, of course, and the friends. I mean, when you're Portuguese, you tend to also see the beach and the ocean as an extension of your house, because you're always going to the, especially when you're kids. I mean, you're always going to the beach and going to the ocean and being with friends and being outside. And I think that's a big part. And of course, the food and even though my mother is French and she cooks really well French food, but both cuisines are really amazing. um, and then the people. I mean, it's really nice people, warm, welcoming. I see the way we welcome the foreigners, and I see the way we also cherish the good times and being. And I think, for instance, now with the pandemic, countries like Portugal really suffer because we tend to have this culture of embracing and being together with people, and really having these moments that are maybe just a dinner with friends or something that we really enjoy, and that's like something that we really miss. And I think that's what makes me more Portuguese.
Yeah, well said. Ricardo, I also just want to take a step back to part of your story and the starting of BetaE. And you mentioned how it was in 2010 and it was a difficult
Yeah.
time in Portuguese in Portugal. I was here at that time as well, trying to sell houses in 2010. It was a challenge. Um, why did you feel the need to help? I mean, what was your, why did you feel the need to help these young guys and to help people get back on their feet?
I think, I mean, I think we all had friends that were going through a tough time, and I was listening to a lot of friends and people that I knew or friends of friends, and everyone was like, either I remember cases where families were separated because there was no work here and the companies were forcing their employees to go work abroad to get money for the company, and people would go for months to, a lot of them went to Angola or Mozambique, and or even Brazil, and and there was a lot of disenchantment with that part, and also people were afraid of making a mistake at their job and being fired, and that was like scary also, because people were like, it's going to take months, years to get a new job. um, and the conditions in Portugal were like, we were bankrupt. Everyone was like, it's going to take years for us to get out of this hole. The government was very direct in saying this is going to take years. So everyone was afraid of the future. And so we needed to provide some light, some hope, especially for this young generation, that a lot of them were entering into the job market and then suddenly getting this wall in front of them, impossible to climb. And we wanted to help, showing that there was an alternative, showing that you can create your own thing. And I think one of the things that really worked was because a lot of the businesses that were started And of course, you know that startups, I mean, a lot of them, the good percentage dies after a few years or after a year. But I think one of the things that worked well for the Portuguese ecosystem was because the government didn't have money, there was no funds to actually support the initial generation of startups at an early stage. And because of that, a lot more died. But those that were actually able to resist, they created this grassroots movement among them that created a very, very strong bond between all these startups. I mean, even today, after 10 years, a lot of the top startups have the founders have really strong ties between them because of that initial bond. And so I think that was really strong. And one of the reasons why we wanted also to create was to give this hope of looking at this entrepreneurship as an alternative. And if we could help one person, that was good enough already for us.
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, it's interesting. You see the stuff that the young people in Portugal are coming up with at the moment, and everyone sort of looks and goes, "Okay, it's in the last 3 years that this has started happening." But in fact, no. This was started way back then.
Yes.
So this was the beginning of something that we're seeing happen on a larger scale in Portugal right now.
Yeah. And a lot of it was done not by government, but by organizations like ours that really pushed privately, pushed for the new ideas, pushed for accelerating ideas, mentoring ideas, getting them to look at also internationally how you get some initial funds. A lot of them got initial funds, especially in those early years, from the UK. There was a lot of funds that started coming to Lisbon and Porto, of course, and we all talk about Porto and Lisbon all the time, but I mean, there's good startups all over Portugal. It's not only in Lisbon and Portugal, in Lisbon and Porto. But yeah, I think that was the beginning, that 2010. You have to also remember that there was a movement happening in the States, especially, of this new concept called co-work. And then there's new concept called accelerator. And then this new concept called startup conference, you know. And all these things, people are like trying to understand how you develop this. It's like a completely new industry with completely new ways of working. And so Portugal was just like any other country, was also fascinated by some of these things. And when we actually started by having everyone wanted to bring something. I wanted to bring an accelerator to Portugal. And there was another friend that wanted to bring an event, and another friend that wanted to bring a co-work. And we all just got together, and Pedro is our CEO. He was the one that actually got together and said, like, guys, let's just do this together, instead of everyone doing their own thing and then not having critical mass. And then really starting BetaE from a ground where many different stakeholders that were at BetaE were able to really push for different projects. So we had the accelerator part, the inspirational talks. We had thinking about the space where we could gather people and have the talks. And we used to do this thing called the Beta Talk every 16 of the month. We would invite people to come and talk about their experiences, and then we would invite people, and even said, because there was no money, we said, bring crackers or bring your drinks, you know, like, and then we'll see. And maybe we had like 10 people in the first and 15, and suddenly it started growing. And I remember some of the later beta talks, after 1 year, we couldn't fit the people. I mean, even everyone standing up, they couldn't fit the room because there was so many people that wanted to come to these things. And then we started expanding to other cities, and then suddenly we were in 10 cities in across Portugal, and then we expanded to Cape Verde and Brazil, and we were doing talks in São Paulo as well, and Praia in Cape Verde. It was amazing. And at a certain point we had like over, I don't know, maybe over 1,000 people every month that were coming to these talks. So it was and you could really feel the momentum and the grassroots movements shaping up. And I think that was really the amazing years of that initial movement of startups and entrepreneurship in Portugal.
Well, I often have clients from all over the world ask me about how Portugal managed to get themselves out of the recession, how we managed to recover. And, you can talk about what the government did, but I always say it was the people. It was like what you're talking about, grassroots level. It was people rolling up their sleeves and working hard to get themselves out of the situation that we found ourselves in. What do you want to say about the Portuguese people as a collective and what they did at that time, and how you saw it, of being able to get ourselves out of a very difficult moment in our history?
Well, I think, and I say this in the best way possible, I think the Portuguese are people that typically don't complain. So, okay, we have a problem. The country is bankrupt, but what are we going to do about it? We'll just have to work and get ourselves out of it instead of just going to the streets and complaining and doing demonstrations. And of course, we had some demonstrations, but if you compare it to other countries, very mild, very, very mild. People were like concentrated in their work, understanding that this was going to be a rough patch, and we needed to survive to arrive to the other side of the tunnel. And I think that's what the Portuguese did. And we worked, we were creative in finding new ways of actually working through the crisis. And I remember for us also was very, very hard, because imagine we were trying to convince people to support startups. At the time, the government was like, look, guys, there's no money. We love what you guys are doing. We can bring the media, we give you some coverage, but that's it. There's no money. And so you have to be very, very creative in finding companies and other entrepreneurs and other people that want to support you. And a lot of these conversations, I mean, I remember pitching like 100 times in a month and getting 100 no's, and maybe one yes, maybe, and it's hard, and every pitch has to be good, because otherwise, if you don't believe in what you're selling, nobody will believe you. And so it's very important that people understand that these things that look now a very easy success were really, really hard at the beginning and really difficult. And we were many times thinking, how are we going to pay? And we were almost no money several times. But we persevered, and I remember when we started our big accelerator, that was in 2013. We had this idea to start this big accelerator, biggest in Europe, and then give a prize and do a big event at the end of the year. And we figured we needed to raise something like 400K for that. But then when we started to raise, we figured this is going to take a year for us to raise the money. So we said, let's just start and raise at the same time. And so we were raising and spending all the time in parallel. And it was a bet. We were like, it was crazy when I think about it. It was completely crazy, especially because some of us had our first kids that year. It was like a lot of challenges, no money, trying to raise in a country that didn't believe in startups, didn't believe in entrepreneurs, didn't believe in what is this weird things called startups, these ideas that really, does this work, is there a business model on this, how do you make money, and all the time saying no and no and no and no. And then bit by bit people started believing, and year after year, and you have to start somewhere. And I remember when we started, I told everyone, look, to create an ecosystem takes 10 years, 10 years of hard work for it to actually go around. So an ecosystem to go around and complete itself takes 10 years. And so we have to keep on pushing and believing that every year we're going to be a little bit better and a little bit better. And suddenly there's an exponential growth. And that's what we saw in the last years, is this exponential growth, that suddenly everyone was believing in the startups and all the corporates wanted in, and they wanted to show they were innovative, and they wanted to be close to the startups so that they could see how they could actually innovate also their own employees and change the mindset of people that were entering the 21st century and needed to refresh their ideas and think differently because the market needed something new, and the startups were in the best position at that time. So I think that's the thing that people have to remember. It's like it looks easy, but it's actually a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to now, and some of the things that you're working on now. One of the things that people will never associate, well, that people very rarely, not very often, will associate Portugal with space and space technology. But you're really, really involved in that area and in that industry. And just tell us a little bit about what you're busy with, Ricardo.
So a lot of stuff, but I'll tell you what the project that you're referring to. Basically, a few years ago, well, actually, back in 2007, I did a program called the Space Studies Program, which is a program from the International Space University. Now, the International Space University is a university that was created maybe 35 years ago, something like this, in the late 80s, by three young guys. Two of them are still alive, Peter Diamandis and Bob Richards. Peter was the one that created the X Prize and Singularity University. I don't know if you've heard about this, but he's a fairly well-known person, and so they were very young at the time. They wanted to create this university that would push for the communities, different communities of space, to be in one place around the world, people that would have different disciplines, not only the engineering part, but the communications, the economics, all the areas that you need to actually develop the space industry. And so they developed this program that was a summer program. It's 10 weeks. They bring in about 150 faculty and mentors, and then there's about 150 students from all over the world that work together in projects, collaborative projects, and then they find ways to actually work together, even being like the American with the European, with the Asian, with the African, different cultures that very quickly need to work together for a common goal. And of course, there's a lot of ways that it doesn't work at the beginning because people have different cultures and different ways of thinking, and maybe you have not only the different nationalities and different cultures, but also the different ways an engineer thinks of, a designer thinks of, a doctor or an economist. All these people, they think differently. And so a few years after I did the program, and with a few friends, um, we were thinking this would be amazing to bring to Portugal. And so every summer is in a different country. It's these 10 weeks that brings so much knowledge to the country, and it could be the start of something really interesting, especially if you aggregate universities that are working in that domain, and you bring in the youth of that country to participate, and you inspire people, and so that's the goal. And so we just got a few weeks ago, we got the green light that Portugal will host the space studies program in 2022 in the summer for 10 weeks, and we'll have these 150 faculty coming from all over the planet to Portugal, and we're planning on doing not only that but also joining in all the stakeholders that actually can benefit from this and create after this something for the future in Portugal. So this would be the first step.
Wow, amazing. I mean, how proud are you that it's coming here, that it's coming to our little country?
Very proud. One, because this takes like years of negotiation and making sure you have the right things in place for the application, and making sure you talk to the right people, and also that the other competing countries are not as good as you for that specific year. And so I guess it was like the perfect storm, and we got the green light from the ISU.
Amazing. And is this going to be just in one particular part of the country, or will it be spread across?
No,
What's the idea?
yeah, the idea is, I mean, we have to have a base, and the base will be in Lisbon, but there will be in different places. There is also a possibility that part of it will be in the Azores, because
Wow.
it's 10 weeks, and hopefully the pandemic will be over by 2022 in the summer, I hope, for the sake of all of us.
Yeah.
But overall, I think yeah, the idea is really to show the diversity also that exists across Portugal. Coimbra has a lot of stuff. Porto has a lot of stuff in space as well. Lisbon, of course, the Azores, different projects that could be shown, and then bringing in the youth from different universities to participate, and how you can actually do like a rocket, and then build a rocket and send and show that to the young Portuguese that could be inspired by, okay, I want to follow an engineering career or a space career or a science career. And a lot of times these things, more than just that specific moment, is what inspired into a young mind. And I think that really works. In the past, I've done a few projects that, like the European Innovation Academy, is also another project that I'm really proud of. Those are projects that inspire the the young mind at a point where that young mind is trying to understand what they want to do in the future, and what inspires them or what captivates them to do, what are the dreams. And if you keep on bringing these kinds of projects to Portugal, one, for sure they will understand much better what it is to be on planet Earth, and all the diversity that exists from all the types of people. I remember the first time I really understood the power of this project that was building the other one that I said, of the European Innovation Academy. I had this Portuguese that came to me and said, "Look, for me, I never left the country, but just to be these weeks with all these young people from all over the world gave me a diversity of knowledge that I didn't know, and now I want to meet all these guys, and I have sofas where I can stay in all these places, and I want to meet them, and I want to meet their cultures and their countries, and understand more about their lives, and this opened up the world to me." And so a lot of the times you have to convince the people that are in this exact point of their age to join in these projects, and feel inspired. And then some of them will be really inspired, and they'll follow on their dreams in this domain.
When you were that young 20-something-year-old in Germany watching their rocket launch, did you ever imagine you'd be responsible for the Space University in Lisbon, in Portugal in
No,
2022?
no, of course not. But I always liked to be like this fire starter. I always liked to, like, in my head, and I think it's important that people think of things that they are good at and things that they're not good at, but then they can find, like I said at the beginning, you can find the people that are good at or much better than them at that specific job, and then convince them to follow with that job. And so I was always good at starting stuff, and I was always good in convincing people to join in at the beginning, and so because of that, it just evolved into like it could be like small things at the beginning when I was young, and bigger stuff, and that now I want to do more of these things.
We've got the perfect part of the country, a perfect part of the country to have a proper launch site. Alentejo. It's flat. There's no wind. I mean, you've got loads of land where there's just nothing going on. We need to speak to Elon Musk. We get a launch station in the Alentejo
We're
for
gonna have that,
SpaceX.
but it's in the Azores.
Oh, really? Which part?
Yeah, there's in Santa Maria. There's a preparation for a launch site there.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Incredible.
for micro satellites, for small satellites.
Any excuse to go to the Azores. That place is it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. Ricardo, you're based you're busy at the moment. You're in a co-working space in Belgium.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for you regarding Belgium. We've got there's a huge amount of Belgians that have come over to Portugal in the last sort of 10 years, investing here, moving here, visiting here often. What do you think it is that the Belgian people like so much about Portugal?
So the weather would be one. But I think the welcoming people, I think there's also a good connection with language, because the Portuguese typically, if it's English or French, or even Spanish, they'll figure out a way to talk to you, and it's easy. And I think people like Portugal. I mean, it's not only the Belgium, the French are also a big community in Portugal. And yeah, I think that's it.
Good stuff. What are 3 things, Ricardo, that you want people to remember and take away from our conversation?
Well, I think don't think that it's not possible. I think if you really believe, you might do a lot of mistakes, but if you really believe that you're bringing something, or you're trying to do something that is important and needs to be an answer for a problem that exists, then don't give up, continue. You'll do mistakes, but you'll learn from those mistakes, and you'll grow, and also you'll teach other people on how to avoid those mistakes. So that would be one. And the other is diversity is very, very important. I think the way you educate your children, or the way you do your own education, try not to be always in the same place, and try to see what's out there. A lot of people, when they finish high school, they go like directly to university, and this happens a lot in Portugal. Why not do a gap year? I mean, especially now when you see the pandemic closes down all the countries, and this should bring some clarity to people, and say, okay, let's enjoy. It's like only one life. Let's enjoy. It's not because 1 year I stopped and I went to do something else, and then came back to university to do my studies. I think you'll learn more by being 1 year abroad, or by doing 1 year by yourself. You'll learn more about yourself than all the years that you had until you finished high school. And then, and then I would say it's important to communicate what you're doing. It's important that people know the stories, and listen, and be inspired. And I think inspiration is a big start. For me, I when I was young, I felt inspired by a lot of other people that were doing amazing stuff, and it just drove me to do this. And I'm sure some people listening might be inspired to do their own things. And so the inspiration is like a big force, and so we should use it.
Excellent. Ricardo, how can people follow you online or stay up to date with some of the work that you're doing?
I mean, the best would be through our own website at BetaE. It's beta-i.com. Or my LinkedIn, Ricardo Marvao. You can find me easily on LinkedIn, and I try to be super responsive to anyone that wants to talk or wants to present a project or wants to maybe just discuss an idea or something like this. Yeah, I would say those two are really the ones.
Okay, we'll put some links in the show notes of the podcast so that people can connect if they need to. Ricardo, a question that we ask all of our guests: Portugal, the simple life. Why?
Well, I think, like I said already, I think in terms of quality of life is amazing, and I think the Portuguese are super welcoming people. I like Portugal every time I go back. I like Portugal even more, especially when I was 10 years abroad, and every time I would come back, I would love my country even more. I think it's an amazing country. My kids love it, even though they traveled. They love it, and all the friends that I meet from abroad, they always say, I mean, Portugal has so many qualities, and really, I would say the quality of life and the welcoming of the people are really two big points.
Beautiful. Ricardo, thank you so much. I've loved this conversation. I've learned a lot. So thank you very much. And for now, I'm going to let you call it.
That's a wrap.
So thank you once again to Ricardo, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. And as we say in Portugal, força. Welcome to the simple life.